Hey everyone, welcome to Creating with Cassie. I am so excited that you're here with me today. Today is a little bit different. Normally I show you an embroidery project. Today I'm going to show you a sewing project, but it's using one of the projects from Meantime Delivered's Perfectly Piece program. And I had a special request from one of my amazing viewers. Thank you so much for requesting that I show you how to put a pillow together, because a lot of these Perfectly Piece videos have pillows that are put together. And I was talking with her and we decided that she might need a little bit of help to learn how to put them together in a couple of different ways. So this is the first of 3 videos that I'm going to show you about how to put a pillow together. The first one I'm going to show you is how to put a pillow together with an envelope closure on the back and a flange around the front side. So I'm going to show you how to do that with this top. I already have it ready. This is the Perfectly Piece block from January 2022, which was the very first block that came out for the Perfectly Piece program. And I put a whole top together. And so now I'm to the point where I need to start adding my flange and do the back and finish it all off. So here it is in all of its glory. I'm so excited to get started with this. So I'm gonna go over to my sewing machine and show you how to put this pillow together. Okay, so I was going through my fabric and I still have quite a lot of this red. And so I think I want this beautiful red to be my flange. And then I decided on this beautiful striped fabric to be the back of this pillow. So I'm gonna show you how to cut the back fabric in a minute, but I'm gonna show you how to do the flange first of all. And the thing you need to think about a flange is it's just like adding borders onto your pillow. So don't be too frightened by that. So what we're going to do is take our little measuring tape, and the first thing we're going to do is put the borders that go on this side. So I'm going to do the vertical borders first, or flange, the vertical side, and then we'll do the top and bottom to cap it off. So I'm going to take my cute little Me Time measuring tape that I have, and I'm just going to measure from the top to the bottom at the center of the quilt and see where I'm at. So it looks like I need to cut my first 2 flanges to 18 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those, and I'm going to cut them. You can do flanges various ways. I'm going to cut it to be a 3-inch start for the flange, so it ends at 2.5 inches because I want it to be a nice kind of fluffy flange. So I'm going to cut these 18 by 3. So I had 2 pieces of fabric. One of them was a little bit longer than 18 and one of them is right at 18. So I'm going to use this one, and I'm just folding it over, and then I'm going to put my ruler right here at 3 inches, and I'm going to cut it right along there so that I have a perfect 3-inch strip for each side. So I folded it over so I have 2 18 by 3-inch strips. So now that I have them cut, I am going to give them a quick starch and a press so that they're laying nice and flat for me when I try and sew them onto my pillow front. All right, now that I have these first 2 flanges cut and pressed, I'm going to line them up against the vertical sides of my quilt. And I'm going to get all my sewing clips. You know how much I love those. And pull a bunch out, and I'm just going to clip this along. I'm going to put one in the top up here, and then I'm going to clip it down the side. And I have that there. I need to adjust that just a little bit so that it kind of holds it in place on this side. And then I'm just going to come and clip along the edges, making sure that I line both of these up as I go. Line it all up here. And you can use as many or as least amount of clips that you prefer. Either is fine, however you like it. And then I add a clip there on the end and another one on this side so that I can see that everything is clipped in place and ready to go. And then I'll just come and do the same thing on this second side. Okay, now that I have everything clipped in place, I can go ahead and move it to my sewing machine, and we're just going to stitch a 1/4 inch on both sides on the front of this pillow, right along the right side and the left side. All right, so I am choosing to stitch with that beautiful cloud blue color that came in the kit this month, but you could stitch it with just a regular white, whatever you think is best for your project. I'm going to go ahead and slide this under my presser foot, and then I'm going to go ahead and start stitching at a 1/4 seam so that I can get this flange attached to the top of my quilt. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I am going to do a back stitch and then just stitch and remove clips as I go. And I am going to speed this part up for you because it will take a while for me to stitch this and I don't want you to get bored. And once you have one side done, go ahead and get rid of your clips, flip your top over, and go ahead and start stitching the other side. Once you have all of that sewn on, I come through and I press the seams, and then I open it up, hold the fabric nice and taut, there you go, and then I press that seam so it lays as flat as possible. And I do that all the way down that flange so that when I pull it over to measure the top and the bottom, I have this nice and as flat as it possibly can be. So I'm gonna go ahead and press it, and then I'll show you what it looks like. All right, this is how it looks with the first two sides on. Isn't that so fun? I feel like it's just stunning. So now what we do, now that we have the flanges on, is we take our cute little measuring tape back out and we measure again in the center from one side to the other, and it looks like I need about 23 inches of fabric in length. And I always like to just double check kind of front and bottom, and it looks like 23 is going to be the best number. And so I'm going to cut some strips that are 23 by 3. Now I do want to show you something. Because this was a kit, I didn't have all the fabric in the world that I wanted, but I really wanted my flange to be red. This is actually a little bit short because that's how much fabric I had left. So this is 20 inches, and I need 3 more inches on each of my sides. So I'm just going to actually add that on. And you can do this, it just shows you what you can do if it's a little bit short. So here's a little bonus, but if you can get away with it, it's better to have the full 23 inches in one piece of fabric. So I'm just going to cut a 3-inch strip out of this 20 inches and then add 3 more inches on so that I can show you how to do this flange, and then I get to keep it in my red color, which is what I wanted. Okay, so I have my 20-inch strip, and now I need to cut my 3 inches. Now remember, I can't cut it directly at 3 inches because I have to sew these together. I need to make sure I have a seam allowance. So I'm going to put this on my board so I can see my 3 inches, and then I'm going to give them about a 1/2 inch more. So I'm happy to trim it later, but I don't want to be just shy of the number that I need. And then that way I can add these little pieces onto my 20-inch strips, and I have the length that I need. Okay, so now that I've added a 1/2 inch to this piece so that I can compensate for the seam allowance on here, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam here, and I just have a little clip here. I'm probably going to put another one over here in the bottom, and I'm just going to sew it real quick, and then I'm going to starch and press these so they can be nice and flat, and I can make sure that this little seam I'm making is as flat as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and slide it under my presser foot, get it at the 1/4 inch mark, go ahead and start stitching. I'm stitching a back stitch because I like to. I'm a back stitch person, and I know it's not exactly perfect. Sometimes they aren't the exact same, but we can always adjust that. Back stitch, and then I can take this out. And then when I press this, I will press that seam nice and flat and as open as possible, and I can come and trim this up later. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch the next one, and then I will see you at the iron. Okay, so I have sprayed my spray starch on here, and I'm just going to press a little bit on the edges on both sides of this seam, and I've made sure I got starch in this seam. And then I am one of those who likes to butterfly their seams open. If you prefer your seams to be all to the right or to the left, that's totally fine. Just keep it consistent. I like mine butterflied open. So I'm going to come in here and get it nice and dry. Give it plenty of heat so that this seam will be as flat as can be. And then when I see that it's mostly dry right here, I'm going to grab my clapper after I heat it really well, and I'm going to press down. And this clapper really helps those seams stay nice and flat. And I just wait, I have 2 fingers on either side, until I can't really feel heat on either side anymore. And when that is gone, then I remove my clapper and I have a very, very flat seam. And then I'm just going to move that along and keep pressing the rest of my flange. Okay, after you have your top and bottom flanges prepped, I like to bring them back over to my top, grab a handful of sewing clips, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to take that flange, I'll scoot that down just a smidge for you, and I'm just going to line it up against the top and those first two borders, and you can see my seam where I had to add on. Of course, it is preferable to have a whole solid piece without a seam, but if you find yourself a little short on fabric, you now know what you can do. And then go ahead and take your clips and start clipping it in place. Again, I do one on both sides on the top corner here and then along the edges as I move along, just making sure it's all evened out. And then after I have everything clipped in place, I'll do the second one on the bottom edge, same story, and then we'll sew. So I'm going to go ahead and finish clipping. Now that I have my top and bottom flanges all stitched, it's time to slide it under my foot, line it up at that 1/4 inch mark, and go ahead and start stitching these on. And I'm just going to do the same thing, start with the back stitch, and then stitch merrily along, removing clips as I go. And then when I'm all done, I'm going to press these just as before. So it's just repeating the same process again. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done, and I'll show you what it looks like once these are all sewn and pressed and ready for the next step. Okay, that's how it looks with the little flanges on. Isn't that awesome? It's going to be so pretty. I'm super excited with how this is turning out. Now, I will tell you that I do have those seams, but you almost can't see them because we press them so hard, and you do have little seams when you put those on, so they're kind of invisible, which is good. So now what we do is we measure again. So we're going to measure across the center of our project, and I'm almost at 23 inches. You lose a little bit when you sew. Same here and same here. Okay, and we need to know that so that we can cut our back fabric. So I'm going to remove this so I can show you how we're going to make that envelope back. Okay, so here's my cute striped fabric, and we just learned that I need to have 23 inches of fabric to cover that back. All right, which is perfect because this is about 23 inches right here. But I'm not going to cut two 23 by 23 inches because I need an envelope. So I need it to open in the back and have a little bit of an overlap. So if I do the math, 23 divided by 2 is 11.5. So that would be if I wanted these two pieces of fabric to be side by side, but if you do a finished edge and you do seams, I'd have a gap. So that's a problem. So I can't do 11.5 by 23. So what I'm going to do is add on a little bit. So I'm going to cut these at 14 by 23 so that I do have room for a finished edge, sewing them on, and to give it a little bit of an overlap. And so I might cut it more a generous 14, between 14, 14.5, just so that I can compensate for that and have a nice overlap. So since this is already 23 this way, I'm okay with having my stripes be horizontal. You can have them be horizontal and vertical. I'm going to take my larger ruler, and looking at my board, I'm just going to scoot this down and make that even. I'm going to measure all the way up here after I get this all straightened out so that we can have this as straight as can be, and bring it up here at 14. And I'm just probably going to bump it a little bit over 14 and give it a generous 14. And I'm going to take my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to get in my way on the camera side and cut it right there. So that way I end up with 14 and about 1/4 by 23. So I can make these cute backs. What I'm going to do is take these and press this all really nice so that it can be nice and flat when I go to finish them off. So I'm going to press them and then I'll come back. Okay, now that I got these lightly pressed, I'm going to do a finished edge. So I'm going to take one of these backs and I'm going to fold it 1/4 inch and press it, and then fold it one more 1/4 inch and press it, and then I'm going to sew it. So I'm going to go ahead and press that first 1/4 inch, the second one, and then I'll show you how to sew it. Okay, so what you do is, I'm doing this on the long side, by the way, not the short side. So leave the short side alone. Do this on the long side. So what you're going to do is just take this over and start pulling that 1/4 inch, the first one in, And where it's long and I have a small iron, you do this in sections. And I just iron it as best I can. And then I take my clapper and I have it help cool down and create that press. Then I'm going to scooch it over and do the same thing. Pull down that 1/4 inch. Come in here with my iron and press it best I can. And if you want, you can pull out a 1/4 inch ruler or something to help you with this, but I just kind of eyeball it. And then I use my clapper again just to help solidify that 1/4 inch so it doesn't go anywhere on me. And then again, scoot it down, and I try and do this in 3 sections when it's this long, if possible. If you have a bigger ironing station, you can just do it a little bit more in one. You would just start at the end, continually go up, and then put your clapper behind you and keep ironing up if you have a larger ironing station. I have a small one, so I make do with what I have. But this clapper is going to help that 1/4 inch stay in place. And then what I'm going to do is directly come in here and fold that second 1/4 inch so that I can have that really nice finished edge. And I am using a firm pressure, making sure that this is the way I want it. And then I come in with that clapper and press it really well. Give it time to cool. So I'm always checking. I always have a thumb over here so I can feel the heat coming over the edge of my clapper. And just wait till that feels cool. And then when it is, I know that that's going to stay in place much better, and I can move along to the next part. And again, if you have a larger station, this is a little bit easier. I have a small ironing station right now, but you make it work. So use firm pressure, heat that whole area up, put your clapper, and help that seam stay in place. And after we do all of this, we're going to take this to our machine and we are going to do a stitch along this finished edge so it can look really nice and finished for our project. Okay, I'm just gonna quick finish this little bit right here on this corner, and then I'll show you how to stitch it. Okay, so now that I have this all pressed really well and I know it's not going to go anywhere, I'm going to slide it into my machine, and I'm going to be stitching more at like 1/8 inch, not at the 1/4, because I want to make sure it stays right where my fold is. I can feel it underneath. If you're nervous, you can stitch it on this side where you can see it, but your bobbin thread is going to be on top. And I made sure to have my blue thread in that matched my box, so I know it matches the fabric that came that month. And I'm just going to slide it into here and lower my foot, and I'm just going to scooch that kind of where I want it. We're doing just a bit of a top stitch here, but I am going to back stitch because I know that is going to be in my seam later. And I'm going to just watch it and put a nice stitch on the top, and I have a beautiful finished edge doing it this way. I just straighten my fabric. If you feel like your edge isn't staying really well, you can go ahead and clip it in place, but mine was nice and flat because I used the starch and the clapper. I had the starch in there before I even started ironing this edge. So once I have this all stitched, then I'm just going to repeat the exact same process with the second one. Give this a little back stitch over here, and we're done. And it ends up looking like this, which is just really nice. So just a nice finished edge. And then, yep, I'm just going to go ahead and do that with the second one. Okay, now that the backs are all stitched, it's time to assemble our project. So what we're going to do is take our beautiful project and place it face down and smooth it in place. And now I'm going to double check. I want to make sure that I have this the right way because it looks the same. Okay, so this is the top and the bottom flange, so I see where those are. And then I'm going to take my back and I'm going to place it face down and make sure that I have it pretty even on the ends. The middle doesn't matter because I'm going to have an overlap. Okay, then I'm going to take my second one and place it face down right on top of my project. Line that up. So now I have a decent overlap. I like to have a bigger overlap. If you like a smaller overlap, then you can go ahead and reduce the amount of extra inches you put in there. But I like, especially where I'm having a fluffy pillow in here, to have some give for that pillow to round. And so I give myself several inches. What I ended up giving myself, so you can see it, is about almost 4 inches of overlap. And that's the way I like it. Everybody can do it their own way. Now that I have this lined up and overlapped, I like to start with an end so that you can see, and grab my sewing clips, and I just start coming around and clipping the back on. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that. It takes a minute. So after I'm all done clipping all of my back onto my front, I get my paper tape. And just because I'm going to be stitching this, I don't want anything to get caught on it, I will tape a couple of places so that this little gap here doesn't open up while I'm sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and keep clipping around, and then I'll catch you back at the sewing machine. Okay, so that's what it ends up looking like with all the clips around and the 3 pieces of tape and the overlap. The other side, you can see the wrong side of my project, and we're going to go ahead and stitch this. Okay, so I have my project over here at my machine, and I'm just going to slide under my presser foot, lining it up about that 1/4 inch seam again, and I'm going to do a back stitch. And then this is a lot heavier with all these clips, so you're going to have to move it along while you're stitching. So you're just going to stitch all the way around this. Again, moving clips as you go. I like to slide some of them. You might have seen that in the videos as I speed things up. I might slide my clips along just to help me keep everything in place. And then when I get to the point where I'm not going to slide it anymore because I'm running into another one, then I go ahead and pop it off. And you're just going to stitch all the way around the whole thing. And you don't have to worry about the fact that you can't put a pillow in there, because we have this little envelope opening so we can get into where the pillow is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that. Okay, I have both sides sewn together now, so I'm going to remove these tapes. And you can honestly, just so you know, you can sew it on the back showing or the front showing. Either way is fine. You just got to make sure that if you're sewing with this underneath, that it doesn't get caught on anything while you're doing it. So now what we're going to do is turn this inside out. I know, and I can hear some of you saying, wait a second, all you did is make the pillow bigger and put a back on it, which is true. I mean, if you wanted to make a bigger pillow, this is absolutely something that you could do, is just add a border. That's really awesome, but it's like, where does the magic of the flange come in? And don't worry, that is still coming. But I want to show you this great envelope closure. So that's how it is. You have the nice fabric on top, you have the little envelope closure going on there, and then you have your cute front, and it's like, yes, it could be a finished pillow right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our point turner, and we're going to come in here and we're going to straighten out all these corners, because they aren't exactly perfect, but we want to try and get them as pointy and nice as we can. And so I'm just going to come in here and point them so that they look really nice. And then we're going to go back to our iron for a minute, which I know there's ironing at every step in this, but once this flange is finished being sewn, it's harder to get this all nice and straight. So I might as well do it beforehand. So what we're going to do is take this over to our iron, and we're going to get these seams as straight as we can and press them really well so that it's nice and flat. So I might add a little bit of starch, I think, again to that to get them really nice and flat. So we're going to iron that, and then I'll show you the magic of making the flange. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is try and wiggle our fabric into place so that it's nice and even. Then we take our starch and we come along and we spritz the edge, And then we're gonna take our iron and we're going to press it nice and flat. What we're going is for a really, really crisp edge here. And we're going to get that on both sides. And then I move along to the next section. Again, wiggle the fabric, spritz it, and then press it. And we're gonna do that all the way around the whole project. So I'm gonna do that real quick and then I'll come right back and show you how it looks. Okay, so what I've done is made all of these edges nice and crisp and tight so that they look really good. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine, and what we're going to do is we're going to stitch in the ditch right here between our quilted top and these flange borders that we put on, and that creates the flange. So I'll show you how to do that right now. The first thing I'm going to do is tape this edge closed, because the last thing I want is for that edge to come up while I'm stitching. And I'm using the paper tape, so if I stitch on it, it's all good and it doesn't matter. You can also pin this closed, which I usually do as a double measure, but I like to have the tape there so that this doesn't wiggle. And then I'll grab a nice size pin and I'll just pin this in place. I'll go all the way through where I'm not going to be stitching so that I have a pin there, and then I'll grab another pin and I'll pin it in place here as well, again not where I'm going to be stitching, so that those stay exactly where I want them to stay. Now that I have everything pressed, taped, and pinned on the back side, I just come in here and I slide this right where my needle is. And I love to either use a stitch in the ditch foot if you have one, or at least a foot that has a very clear center mark. And so I'm going to line this up as close as I can, and I'm just going to lightly put the needle down. So I do this by hand, especially if it slides, and I'm looking to be right on target. So once I have that right where it needs to be, I'm trying to stitch in between the two fabrics. I'm using that light blue color that matches the quilting over here, and I'm going to try my best not to get here on the red. So it's best to do this nice and slow. And this is again why we taped and pinned the back, because it's going to take us a minute. And I'm just going to look really closely here, and I'm going to do one back stitch, and I'm just going to stitch nice and slowly. And you don't have to worry about how long this takes, no winning races. Just go ahead and stitch right in that edge as close as you can, which is what stitching in the ditch means. But if you're going to err on one side or the other, try and get it on this side and not in the red. That's why a nice stitch in the ditch foot can be really helpful and make this process a lot easier. But I'm just going to eyeball it, and then once I've stitched all the way around, we'll have a flange. It's that easy. It's kind of cool. So I'm just going to speed this part up, and you can watch me stitch in the ditch. I do have one tip for you while I'm doing this, and that is I like to try and spread the fabric open and try and keep the red away from the needle. And so while I'm stitching, I'm kind of pulling the red fabric away with this hand so that I have a better chance of being in that ditch. And then I'm doing the same with this hand. I'm just kind of spreading these open so that it's a little bit easier to stitch right where I want it to stitch. And that's just my little tip for you on stitching in the ditch. I'm going to carry on stitching. All right, when you get to the corner, I do it very, very slowly, and I'm just watching, and I most of the time come over here and hand crank instead of use the foot pedal the last two stitches, because I want to be dead on. And so I always come in here and double check, make sure that I don't need one more stitch, and I leave my needle down. Then I lift up my foot and I twist my project, and then I come in here and make sure that my back fabric is laying flat, because the last thing I want is for my back fabric to be folded funny, and that's why I always double check it. And then I put my foot down, make sure everything is good with my hand, and then I carry on stitching. All right, and then I pull the fabric and stitch along, and that's how you turn a corner when you're stitching in the ditch. Okay, now that we've sewn all the way around, which you can kind of see here on the back, we come and remove the pins. And you can use more pins if you want than the 2. And then remove the tape. Pull that out of the stitches there. And now, because this has an envelope closure, you do have these little pockets here. You can just come in and hand stitch those or leave them, whichever you prefer. So you can just hand stitch those closed, but then leave this big pocket open, because that's how we're going to get the pillow inside. So something to keep in mind is when you choose your pillow form, make sure that it fits the center part, not the part that you have as the flange. The flange is extra. So this is 18 by 18, and so I'm going to use one of Kimberbell's 18 by 18-inch pillow forms, and then that will really show you what this flange looks like, because flat, it seems, you know, just like a border. All right, I have a brand new pillow form, so I'm just going to fluff it up a little bit. It just barely came out of its plastic, so I'm going to give it some life, give it a little bit of fluffing. So that's something to keep in mind when you have a brand new pillow form. They sometimes need to be given some life and some fluffing. So after I've got it fluffed, I'm going to turn this over, and I'm just going to insert this. So I'm going to open up the envelope, and I'm going to grab the bottom side one, and I'm going to start by pushing the pillow into that part and just wiggle it in and get it kind of in place, and then I'm just going to kind of pull the top and push the edges in, and then I'll just straighten that out, and la-da, you have a pillow with a cute little flange. You guys, look what we made! Isn't that amazing? A cute little flange, super easy to do. You can put this on any of your projects. It's just all about stitching in that ditch and having that extra fabric that's bigger than your pillow form. And then you can have such a fun pillow that's squishy and has a flange. And I'm so glad we could also show you how to make that envelope closure, which is really easy for putting your pillows into your homemade pillows that you make. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for joining me today and learning how to make a flange, how to make an envelope closure for your pillows, and just stitching with me. I hope that you go out and make something beautiful, and we'll see you when I bring part 2 and part 3 of how to finish a pillow, which will be coming soon, I promise. But I hope that you try this one out and make a pillow with a flange, and we'll see you next time. Go out and make something beautiful!